Jim.
Benga, I'm just wondering whether you're also making comparison of what's happening at home, as it were. So the kinds of writings that we get in Singapore and Malaysia in English, if there are in English, and if there are any kind of interconnections between those sorts of writings and what the Asian Australians are writing about? Or are they completely different?
Paul could probably say a lot more about what's happening in the Indian tradition than I can, so I will leave that aside because I think it's rather complex and, you know, it's a very rich and varied tradition. The Chinese literature in English that I know a little bit about, I'd say that it has diversified a lot. I think you get a lot of both diasporic and Chinese-based writers who are doing that kind of search for roots and search of the past and all that sort of thing, that possibly with an eye to the translation market. I don't know, but also once again you get young writers who very much react against that, and I've done some study of Chinese chick lit, and you see that all the time, that, you know, this stuff that Hui Tan talks about, saying we are more like Bridget Jones than Madame Mao, and insisting on that. The kind of writing you get in Shanghai Baby, which is really saying, you know, we leave all that past behind. We are part of a commercial culture, of a westernized culture, of a very different outlook on life. We in fact reject our past. But, you know, you're talking about a huge country and a huge culture where you have so many varieties, and we only, or I only, have access to the English, like the literature available in English language. But those debates certainly happen. But they're also informed by other things that my PhD students are able to explore, but I can't.
Question?
Oh, all right.
It's going to be a mess though, because I'm trying to put it together in my head. I wondered about, just thinking about the whole question of, I suppose, trying to think about a Chinese Australian identity that I suppose distances itself from the stories of oppression that, you know, that you were talking about, how Alice Pine sort of starts by that kind of statement of distancing herself. And I just wondered that one of the things that really struck me about Unpolished Gem is that there is a story of oppression that's a specifically gendered oppression story in it, which is, you know, about her parents' ideas about sort of marrying her, you know, off to a Chinese man, etc. And I wondered to what extent you feel the novel actually does, or perhaps not a novel, the story does actually end up using some central tropes, and particularly the tropes that somebody like Yang Yu was sort of saying, you know, enough of the bound feet and the, you know,
I mean, part of Yang Yu's anger about all of this is that the boom has primarily focused on women writers, and that male writers like himself have been quite a lot less successful. I'm sorry, I think I've got my telephone ringing. I'll just turn it off. Sorry about that. It's my mother ringing from Norway. I will bring her back later. Yes, it's very gendered. There have been examples, and there are more now. You know, as I said, in order, the sort of thing you get in We Return is very much, you know, this is on the one hand a story of, you know, the terrible things that happened during the Cultural Revolution to everybody, but it is mostly gendered female, and the oppression, the political oppression and the sort of male oppressions are kind of come together in an interesting way. So I'm not sure where this is going, but if you're simply saying that it's gendered, yes, it absolutely is.
Louise has had to go. As you were speaking, I was thinking about the parallels and differences with Indigenous writers. Would you like to comment on that?
I think it is interesting that the kind of interest in women's life writing that we get in other markets in relation to Asian writers seem to have happened in Australia more in the context of Indigenous women's life writing. And I think you get similar types of debates and perhaps even much more sensitive ones in Australia around those issues. I think the writers very much don't really want to impinge on each other's territories or even in each other's critical discussions, but I think there are a lot of similarities in the way, you know, this question of, well, oppression, but also search for cultural roots and that sort of thing. There are very important parallels, and perhaps one of the reasons that there hasn't been that much, or rather than the kind of writing that has after all come out in Australia in that genre. I'm thinking about writers like Liliana Mu, for example, have not really had very much prominence. Could be that that kind of attention has been focused on the Indigenous writing instead. I don't know that that's a good example, but or a good explanation, but I think that there are certainly interesting parallels between that, whereas in the US, perhaps to a lesser extent in Canada, there hasn't been that kind of focus on Indigenous life writing as we have in Australia.
Any other questions? Well, perhaps then we should draw it to a close and thank Megha very much.
I should get unwired. Thank you very much.
And please join us for refreshment. There appears to be a party going on.
Some people coming just for the refreshments and not for the talk. Can I take these things off?